stop talking now. We can't get in trouble, yeah. Make sure you edit, Steve.
So, ironically, we're talking about leadership also. No, that's downstairs. Apparently, I'm double booked. I don't know that as far as from Fast and Learn, or they're or they knew I was speaking about leadership and they're broadcasting this downstairs. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we had talked about leadership and kind of wrestling with this idea of the importance of it, how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said that this is something that is so praiseworthy. It's something that an individual receives a lot of reward for. There is a very specific reward for people who seek leadership positions. Also, the danger of that, right? The trials, the tribulations that are associated with becoming a leader and moving into that position. And we said that the reality is that when it comes to leadership, that it will forever be there, right? There's never going to be a time where people will not seek leadership positions. There will never be, the vacuum will never be empty, right? That role will always be fulfilled. And why? Because it is essential. Like you need leadership. I think what's interesting, I actually had a discussion earlier today about like the issue of like khilafah. Is it something that I'm supposed to individually strive for? No, right? It's not an obligation. Like we already know what our obligations are. Those are the 5 pillars of Islam, the 6 pillars of Iman, and from them is not the khilafah, right? Like it's not a necessary component to it. Some people try making it like that, right? Some people put it to that position. Not to dismiss its importance in any way, shape, or form, but the reality is, if we understand this, once Muslims are organized, what is a natural consequence of that? You need leadership, right? Muslims that go, forget Muslims, but like people in any space, like if you have like a group of people and you just put them into a space, what is going to happen? You're going to have a hierarchy, right? Naturally, it develops. A leader is going to come out of that. People are going to be organized, and why? Because that is more efficient. It's right. It's how you make decisions. At George Mason, they're having problems like with the musalla space. Like somebody said that it was like a fire hazard, so now they've lost that space. There's like over 1,000. So there's like over 1,000 students that go to Muslims that go to George Mason, and I was like, is it reasonable to have 1,000 people go to the dean's office time and again to complain about this issue? It's not, right? You choose a representative, you choose leader, you become organized, and this happens, like I said, in every single space. So when it comes to the issue of intention, remember we had spoken about that if a person has good intention, we should be encouraging, and if a person has bad intention, what do we do? Right, we try to find ways to dissuade them, absolutely, right? Like we try to advise them. Like, so how do I determine that? Yeah, okay. Well, I'll make it easy. How do I determine people's intentions? They'll be back.
Check their motivation.
Huh? How do you check their motivation? How do you know? How do you know?
You observe.
I'm sorry?
You observe them.
You can observe. Okay. Well, Ghazāli, he says you don't. Like, don't even worry about it. It doesn't matter what other people's intentions are when they're seeking position, or if their intentions are bad. Why does it matter to me?
Before they get to the
Exactly, right? So, or even if they're in that position, at the end of the day, if you have a leader, right, you tried advising them, you tried speaking to them, everything's okay?
You dropped the chair on his face.
Oh.
You guys are getting slow.
Okay. Allah protect us. Is his foot still in one piece?
Generally.
Okay, alhamdulillah, he's fine. Man, I remember some of the stuff we did growing up in the masjid. But anyway, like, so you focus on yourself, right? There's no reason to spend time figuring out what other people's intentions are. And at the end of the day, if I wanted to know somebody else's intention, what do? I ask, right? You can I truly ever know what a person's intention is or what they're holding in their heart? No, I can't. And if I need to know, then I should ask. Like, what are situations where I would need to know somebody's intention?
In leadership or just general?
It's in general. Marriage, right? Marriage is super important. That I need to know what the other person's intention is. So how do I know that?
Ask.
No, you have to be able to read their minds. No, like, no, right? You ask, right? And that's what you do. And the answer that you get, what do I do with the answer? Huh? Exactly it, right? I listen to what they say. The moment that my wife tells me that this is what I'm feeling, I have no choice except to what? Accept it and trust her. Now, if she has secondary meanings or if she's trying to test or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's a different issue and that's a different problem. But at the end of the day, if I need to know somebody's intention, I say, hey, what is your intention? And they tell me this is my intention. I am now obligated to trust them because I am not allowed to assume that they're what? Lying. Lying. Like I have no right to assume anybody's lying. And if I'm asking a very straightforward question, right? What is your intention concerning this? Why did you say this? Why did you do that? And a person says, I did this because of X, Y, Z. It's like, okay. This doesn't mean that I can't always engage, right? And be like, okay, well, you're saying that this was the reason, but why you also did this, this, and this. So how does that tie back? You know what I mean? Like, and that's a conversation. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to people in general or dealing with people in leadership positions, it is not my job to focus on what other people's intentions are. Because most of the time, it does not concern me. I'm more concerned with what, so if I have somebody in a leadership position, regardless of what their intention is, what is it that usually concerns me, the individual? The actions. That's it, right? If he's fulfilling his promises, if he's just even fulfilling his promises, are there situations where I can excuse the person in a leadership position? Yeah. Absolutely, right? So if someone says to me, okay, this project is going to take 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks goes by, the project's not done, I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they say, all right, well, we didn't get the shipment in, or this happened, blah, blah, blah. Can I make an excuse for that person? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm less concerned with necessarily the results all the time, right? As long as there is a reasonable excuse for them. But I'm more concerned with their actions. Like, what is it that they're doing? Are sometimes people very poor communicators? Yes, right? Some people, they're just very poor communicators. Or some people, they have no filter on when they speak and when they say things. But when you look at what they do, you're like, well, he's actually completed this assignment, he's fulfilled this project, he's taken care of this. And like I said, in those situations, does it matter what the intention was? No, it was irrelevant. So he says here, if they're ill-intended, so if a person is in leadership position and they have a bad intention, regardless of what I say to them, are they going to step down? No. No, right? They're going to hold on to it. Why? Because they have bad intentions. Their idea was to take power and to hold it. He says, and if they're sincere, I can encourage them. That's all. But what can give me signs on which path to choose? And what is essentially he's saying here?
As far as the setting up or not? Is that what you mean?
So my question here is like, okay, you have two people, right?
If they were sincere, they'll come to you seeking that advice themselves in some sort of fashion.
Okay.
If they're ill-intended, it won't matter because they're not even offering.
Absolutely.
Seeking that counsel.
So what is the difference here? The difference isn't my attitude, it's what? It's theirs. This person, is he going to come to me and ask me for advice? No. So how can I encourage him? If I don't know what's going on. So there's no way for me to encourage him. This person, what's going to happen? He's probably going to come to me and seek advice. Be like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I can go up to that person and be like, you know what? You're doing a great job. I really appreciate that. He gets into a bit of a side discussion on evil scholarship and what that is and what that looks like. Ghazāli is a very interesting person. He really had a problem with the clergy class. It was one of the reasons that he left Madrasa Nizamiyya. So he was in Madrasa Nizamiyya and he was studying. Genius, absolute genius. Like they would ask questions, he'd be the first one to come up with the answer, he would come up with different solutions, he'd come up with different perspectives. Everybody started recognizing like he's like a shooting star, right? Like he's going up there. And he starts noticing things when he's looking around. He's in the madrasa and he's seeing this, and he's like, I would look and I would see the sheikh walking, and you knew he was the sheikh because of how he was dressed, right? Like he had the sheikh uniform, and he said he would be followed by all of his students. His students would flutter about him, and he was like, I saw that and I became disgusted. What did he do after that? You guys know? He left. Where'd he go? He went. He became a janitor in Damascus. He was so fed up with the system, right? He was so fed up with the system that he was like, forget all this, and he went to Damascus. He became a janitor. He made sure to go to a place where nobody knew who he was. He was like, you know what? I just want to be lowly. And the reason he was a janitor, or I would say custodian. Janitor is probably not the right term, right? He was a custodian. He was a custodian. He wanted to be a custodian at the masjid. One of the reasons he wanted to be a custodian at the masjid is because he still wanted to overhear the lessons that were happening. So one day he was cleaning the masjid. He overheard a lesson, and the teacher, he asked a question to his students. Nobody had the answer. So then one of the students, they were talking. They were talking to him, and they were like, he was like, yeah, you know, it's like we had a really hard question from the teacher, and then Ghazāli was like, yeah, da 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 da, like he gave the answer. He gave the answer. So then the student went back to the teacher, and he was like, well, you know, this is the answer. And the teacher, what did the teacher say? He's like, you're not. This is not you. You're not. Like, yeah. Allah understand. But like teachers know their students, right? So he was like, okay, you didn't come up with the answer. Who told you that answer? Like, who told you? And he was like, the custodian. And he was like, what do you mean the custodian told you the answer? He was like, yeah, the guy right there who cleans the masjid.
Literally good will hunting.
Right? It's like, oh, you know, the guy right here. So like he called him and he's like, who are you? Like, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, you know, I studied in Islamia, like I'm Ghazāli and this and that. So, and then, you know, he ended up going back and teaching, but it's interesting, like I said. So you see him attacking the clergy, you see him attacking the scholar class, you see him attacking the qurra, the qadis a lot too. What's interesting is that now I'm in a position of clergy, and I'm like starting to agree with him a lot. But Allah protect us. So these are some of the pieces of advice that he has, and these are some of the things and signs that he says that an individual should look for. He says number one, the wa'al, or the one who is speaking, or the person, the cleric, he should always try to fix his intention and keep it focused on the next life. Meaning what? What is he saying here? What is the biggest distraction? Yeah.
The fame.
The fame. Absolutely. 100%. The fame, sometimes with fame could come wealth, right? So these are some of the things that can possibly come with the position, but you have to be worried about fame. If you decide to take this route, if you decide to take this path, if you want to get into dawah, if you want to be a scholar, if you want to be an Islamic academic, if you want to be a preacher, you want to be a cleric, whatever the case might be very, 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 very careful. And he's like, okay, well, some of the things that we as a community should look for when we see these people is, okay, do they use a lot of flowery language? Do they use a lot of poetic expressions? Do they encourage people to sin through joking, right? Not directly, but through joking. And essentially he said that if they have these characteristics, then they're more aligned with Dajjal and the Shaitan than they are with Allah and His Messenger.
Can you use flower that I know?
Sure. So what do all these things have in common? So if a person uses a lot of flowery language, why is that a problem? Why is that an issue? There's no substance, right? So a person can use a lot of big words, a person can say a lot of things, and people will walk away sometimes too, affected with that. They'll be like, man, so-and-so gave like a great khutbah, or so-and-so gave a great talk, or so-and-so gave a great speech. And then usually the follow-up question is like, oh, cool, what did they talk about? And what is usually the answer? Or I don't know, I don't remember. And sometimes that's genuine, right? Maybe a person did have substance and the person didn't walk away with anything. But usually, flowery language is a way to hide behind the lack of substance and the lack of information and the lack of knowledge. I would say in the modern era, a good way of substituting this is throwing around a lot of Arabic. So if you have someone, like they'll throw in a lot of Arabic terms when they're speaking, why is that a problem?
Makes you feel genuine.
Lack.
No, well, not just that. Okay, my audience is predominantly who? My audience is predominantly non-Arab speaking.
They can't translate it, so they just assume.
To appear knowledgeable.
Right, because it gives me the appearance of knowledge. It's like, oh man, he used this word, or he knows that word, or like, you know what I mean? And he'll just throw in a lot of words without even many times translating what that word means. And again, the more decorum that I put out there, and the more, what's the word I'm looking for more? Huh? Not adab. Adab is good. We should all have adab. But the more
Ostentatious.
yeah, it's like, you know what I mean, like the more beautiful the presentation, it's the more likelihood that there's a lack of substance behind it, right? It's style over substance, right? It's very stylistic with a lot of these things, and even myself as an observer, because here Ghazāli is actually warning two people. There are two types of people here that are being warned. Number one, very clearly, the clergy and the preacher, the academic, whoever it might be. Who is the second person that he's warning? The community. He's saying that, listen, just because you're a community member, and even if you might not have knowledge, you are still what? You're still accountable. You're still accountable because I'm giving you all the signs. I'm giving you all the red flags that you need to look for. So what causes us as community members to keep such people installed?
We're afraid of change.
Status quo. It's a big thing. It's a big problem. And who addresses the status quo time and time again?
The Prophet.
Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, this is what our aba used to do. This is what our grandfathers used to do. This is something that we've inherited. Well, we've been doing it like this forever. Status quo. Like, what else? And we'll come back to status quo. Why is it that we're afraid to? Why is it we're afraid of change?
Well, he just said, you see somebody with bad intentions, don't.
No, sure, absolutely. But here, is there a problem here? Because now he's not talking about leaders. Who is he talking about?
People.
No, not just people. He's talking about clergy. He's talking about ulama. He's talking about a'immah. He's talking about qurra. He's talking about wa'adh. Right? He's talking about people who have a religious impact. So he's saying these people who have a religious impact, you have to remove them. Why? Right. Now they're convinced the ordinary people, and there's nothing that they're teaching them. Not just that. And if I am not teaching you, what does Ghazāli say here? That this is shaitan. Right? He is just, because if a person doesn't have knowledge to guide people to Allah, who is he going to guide them to? To the shaitan. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said very clearly, he says, اتَّخَذَ النَّاسُ رُؤُوسًا جُهَالًا, that the people will take unqualified, right? So juhal is the term that's used, right? Ignorant. But the reality is there a person who is an absolute ignoramus? Like he doesn't know anything at all?
Yes.
I'm saying, but I'm saying, so you're telling me there's a person, people who exist who have zero skill set for anything? They can't even do labor? No, I mean, I know you guys work in labor, so maybe that's why you're upset. No, in general, somebody has some type, like, you know what I mean? Like everybody has one skill that they're good at, or maybe multiple skills that they're good at. Here, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that you're going to install people who are not qualified. And he says what? فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا, that they themselves are misguided and they misguide others. So he's saying that's why these people need to be removed. As far as like political leaders, I would say that the clergy, they always did a couple things. Anytime the clergy had a problem with leadership, the first step wasn't revolution. That wasn't always the first step. Why?
Because they would be, the power, the wealth,
Huh?
have it.
Okay, power, sure. What else? It creates instability. And not just that, how many of these clergy are willing to depose the leader and then step in? None of them. Like they recognize that about themselves. They're like, okay, if we remove this guy, I'm not going to do it. And usually, because of that instability, what kind of people come into power and are installed? They're usually worse. They're usually worse than the guy who preceded them. So you do have situations like, for example, you have Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Yes, he fought the ruler at the time. You have Hassan radiallahu anh. He fought the ruler. He's like, no, this is an unjust khilafah, right? So it's not like you don't have revolutionaries throughout Islamic history, but in general, they were very reserved in initiating revolution.
Why were there actually the ones who were first to from the Khalifas to be kind of questions or to be addressed to the clergy? What do you say about this? What do you say about that?
Yeah. In the first,
They had to like either agree with them,
or kill them,
you know?
which is what happened a lot too, unfortunately. But
and they were the first ones.
Yeah. So historically, in Islamic society, the two classes of people that were always at odds were the political class and the clergy, like in the ulama, always. Historically, this is not something that's strange. But even then, the ulama almost always recognized the authority of the political class, almost always. They would never encourage people to depose them. They would never encourage people like to pull them or remove them. There are instances, right, where revolution is encouraged, and there's nothing wrong with revolution as long as there is a reasonable plan in place. Like, okay, no, this is a transition plan, this is what we're going to do. It's not like, oh, we're just going to depose this person, because 9 times out of 10, or 900 times out of 1,000, it's going to be somebody worse, significantly worse. And we've seen, like, after the Arab Spring, which leader is better than the previous one? Sisi. Allah protect us, man. But anyway, he's saying that no. In these situations, it's okay to depose, it's okay to remove, because of the religious impact that these people have.
So
Yeah.
it's talking about like scholars that are joking, and through their joking, they're trying to instigate something like that.
Yes, they're instigating sin.
An example, like
There's a lot of them on the like Arab TV shows that you see a lot of these kinds of sinning. Like they make it seem casual. They have like flowers in the background of their VFX.
I mean, I don't know. I'd have to see them to
Like
experience.
puppets of
Yeah, there are some people who are, definitely, right? So even people, when they see government puppets, or they see like we call them scholars for dollars, right? This is something that we as individuals, as community, we recognize. So what does the community do with such people? In general, they stay away. They're like, oh man, that guy's a puppet. I'm not trying to listen to him. Oh, that guy has crazy fatwa. I'm not trying to listen to that guy. There's a weeding process that is definitely in place. Not everybody needs to be deposed.
yeah.
Sometimes it's better to ignore, right? Ignore and just stay away. You don't have to. But like I said, look for substance is essentially what Ghazāli is saying here. If I want to know a person's scholarly ability, listen to what he's saying, not necessarily how he's saying it.
What about the ones that do have substance?
Mhm.
And they still.
Sure. If they're doing these things, is it enhancing? So here, let me put it this way. If a person has substance and he presents it nicely, what happens? It enhances the substance that he has. Does that make sense?
Sorry, my question, let me rephrase it. Somebody who has a substance and they're using it in the ill intent. Which is good substance.
Oh, there's nothing you can do about that. Right? Why? Because I cannot judge somebody's intention. Right? There's no way to gauge that. There's no way for me to know. Over here, we're just dealing with community ramifications. And not just that. Okay, even hypocrites. Did the hypocrites pray?
Yes.
Yeah, they did. Did they give zakah? Yeah, they did. Did they fight and put their lives on the line along with the Prophet ﷺ?
Yes.
Yeah, they did. Right? So, and what was going on in their hearts? They didn't believe, but they're like, hey, we need to keep up the show. And the same thing can apply to these people, right? They want to keep up the show. So what do? They're like, and even in, you guys are all familiar with Orientalists? So these are usually non-Muslims that study Islam. And some of them for the intention of undermining it and like, like undermining certain ideas and certain people and like, fundamental things about the religion. How come they all just don't lie and just start making up stuff?
Because it feels more authentic when you have some basis.
Right? So if there's a basis for that, not just that, how is the competition between them? It's very harsh, right? So amongst academics, the competition is so harsh that the moment somebody lies or the moment somebody misquotes, right, they're going to start picking apart, and it's going to completely undermine that person's position and authority. So what does he need to do? He needs to make sure that he is honest and consistently truthful. So like even in those spaces, there are some things that I would add to this. I'm no Ghazāli, but I think this shift to personal focus it becomes a lot easier when we do a couple things. When we have transparency, which is fundamentally important. And what does transparency look like? Transparency should look like presenting to the community the things that you are doing. Why? Because where's the salary coming from for most of these people? It's coming from the community, right? So there has to be an internal audit, right? There has to be a way for the community to know. It's like, okay, listen, we're giving money. Where is this money going? What programs are you doing? Who are you collaborating with? Who are you working with? And why do some clergy not share that information? Because there's a personal benefit in there by keeping that gray area. And if I don't tell anybody what I'm doing, and somebody asks, what can I do? I can just make it up. And I've dealt with imams like this. It's like, oh, I had 2,500 appointments, or I met with 2,500 people last year. Like, and I'm like, oh wow, do you have a record of that somewhere? Like, how do I verify this information? No, yeah, you can trust me. Why? On what basis? If you're coming to me with like ridiculous numbers, it's very difficult for me to trust you. So transparency is a way for one to protect themselves and to protect the community. Because if anybody from outside is like, oh, well, why do you pay this guy this much, or why do you do this, or why do you do that? All they have to do is like, well, these are the things that he does. And we feel that what we give to him makes it worth these services that are being provided. Yeah. And it creates a sense of accountability, because every quarter or twice a year or with an annual report, what happens to that clergy member? There's a sense of accountability, because he knows that what does he have to do? Right? I have to report. I have to report to the community. I have to tell them like what it is that I'm doing. The second thing, a marketplace of ideas. What does that mean?
What is it?
Marketplace of ideas.
The best idea wins.
The best idea is going to win. And I truly believe that, because the truth is the heaviest thing that you can find. In the moment I drop truth into a space, what happens to falsehood? It vanishes. And if I want this to happen, if I start silencing voices, what happens? You don't get the best idea. And just because a person might not be strong in fiqh, or he might not be strong in tarikh, or in history, or he might not be strong in legal studies, it doesn't mean that he's not good in hadith. In silencing him, did it benefit him? And let's say, okay, yeah, he is weak. And let's say, okay, you know what? He's not as qualified. Can he still have a good idea?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? Can he still have a good contribution if he's sincere? Absolutely. And not just that, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give everybody varying levels of intellect?
Yes.
Absolutely. There's some things that people understand very quickly. Sometimes things take a little bit more time. Sometimes people have different perspectives. Sometimes people have different paradigms on how to deal with things. And the only way for us to see that and to judge that is if it's publicly presented.
Yes.
I had someone come to me one time and they're like, Sheikh, why do you share what the different madhahib have to say about particular issues? And I said to them, because we live in a different era now. And if I don't tell the person who I'm calling, or the person who's coming to ask me a question, that, okay, well, these are what the different madhahib are and this is what they say, blah, blah, blah. 9 times out of 10, they've already researched the issue before they've come and talked to me. And if I don't tell them that, hey, these are the opinions, what are they going to think about me?
You're hiding something.
That I'm hiding something, or I'm not qualified, or he doesn't know. So it's always important. And what is that? That goes back to this, in being transparent. in making sure that I'm sharing what it is that I know. And part of this transparency is also, when I don't know, what should we do? I don't know. It's very simple. I don't know if I told you guys a story of when I was being hired here. So there are 4 interviews that I had a series of interviews. One was like an initial interview, then I met with the board, then we had a town hall, and then I had an interview with like a group of people who they're like, yeah, we don't really know about this guy. So they just asked me, I would say probably like, I was on the phone for an hour and a half or so, and they asked me about like 120 fatwa, like on very specific issues in Masail. So on a number of them, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to go back. Or I have to check. I don't remember. So I got a call from the chair, like immediately after the phone call. They're like, yeah, mashallah, you did great. I was like, how? He's like, because when you didn't know, you said, I don't know. I was like, so how did I become the Imam of Dar al-Hijrah? By saying, I don't know.
Were they trick questions?
I think some of them were gotcha questions. Some of them were legitimate. The problem is like sometimes you have very specific scenarios. So you have a general ruling, and then you'll have a specific scenario where it doesn't apply. I don't always remember what the scenario is, and I'm like, that's the purpose of books, right? You know, so you can go and you can refer back to them. I don't need to be a walking encyclopedia. That's not necessary. I need to know how to use encyclopedias, and I need to know how to use the resources, not be a walking one. Yeah. I know, right? May Allah guide me. So superficial actions without rectification of the heart is similar to a house that is well lit outside but dark outside. Why is he using this example? What is he talking about?
If you're just acting without feeling or believing in the intention, then
Okay.
look good.
Okay. Good.
Through motion.
What does this have to do with the previous discussion?
It would seem inviting to someone from the outside, but once they get inside there,
They realize what?
this was a
You're
trap.
dead inside.
Okay. Right. There's no substance, right? That's exactly what he's talking about here. Is that when you look outside, the house looks what? It looks really pretty, it looks really amazing, and then when you walk in, what do you see? Absolutely nothing. That is the danger of having style over substance. Like I said, whoops, so I already broke one, let me break this one too. This is the danger of having style over substance, but like I said, the one who has substance, what does the style do? It adds value and it enhances. But over here, it just tricks people. So over here, I really like the statement of his, but we'll probably take this and stop, inshallah. You servants of the world, not like pious servants or noble freemen, the world is on the verge of tearing you away from your roots, throwing you on your faces, then crushing your throats, then taking your sins by your sides, then pushing you from behind, then handing you over to the king of religion. He's talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, barefoot and naked, alone. He will stand you on your sins and reward you for your evil deeds. Who is he talking about?
The corrupt clergy.
He's talking about the evil scholars. He's talking about the corrupt clergy. And this is based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that from the people who will be thrown by their faces into the hellfire, one of them will be the one who is a scholar. And he will go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that I became a scholar for your sake, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, kadhabt, you lied. You only became a scholar so that people would call you a scholar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us sincere. I'm traveling next week. I might be back on Thursday, inshallah. I'll put it in the announcement group. For those of you that aren't in the announcement group, I can add you, inshallah. But I should be back in time. If I'm not, I'll put an announcement out. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakum khair. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khairi khalqin. Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Jazakum khair.